The first light of dawn cracked over Route 19, like a promise half-remembered, painting the cracked asphalt in hues of gold and shadow. Miles Drift Nolan throttled his Harley low, the engine's rumble a steady heartbeat against the chill wind whipping through the desert scrub. At 44, Drift was a man carved from road dust and quiet regrets, tattoos snaking up his arms like forgotten maps, a leather vest patched with the Iron Promise emblem, a silver skull encircled by thorns. He'd ridden this stretch every morning for 2 years, heading to the garage in Dust Haven where he fixed rigs for truckers who asked no questions. The routine was his anchor, coffee black as midnight at the diner, then the open road where the world couldn't touch the ghosts he carried. But today, something shattered the rhythm. At the old bus stop, a weathered bench flanked by tumbleweeds and a faded sign reading Bennett Crossing, the little girl wasn't there. No small hand raised in that unwavering wave, no bright eyes catching his like he was some knight from a storybook. Clara Bennett, 7 years old with braids, like twisted ropes and a smile that cut through the grey, had been his silent ritual. Every dawn, rain or shine, she'd stand there waiting for the school bus, waving as if Drift were the only soul worth greeting in the empty miles. He'd nod back, a flicker of acknowledgement, but never stop. Riders like him didn't linger. The road demanded motion, and motion kept the past at bay. Drift eased off the throttle, his bike growling to a halt 50 yards past the stop. The air smelled of sage and exhaust, sharp against the knot forming in his gut. He killed the engine, boots crunching gravel as he walked back. There she was, after all, curled on the bench, knees drawn up, clutching a backpack that sagged like it carried the weight of the world. Her coat was too big, swallowing her frame, and her face was buried in her arms, shoulders trembling with silent sobs. No wave, no smile, just a child alone in the creeping light, as if the dawn had forgotten her. "Hey, kid," Drift said softly, his voice rough from years of wind and unspoken words. He crouched a safe distance away, helmet tucked under his arm, the morning sun glinting off his stubble. Clara peeked up, eyes red-rimmed and wide, streaked with tears that hadn't dried. She didn't run or scream. Instead, she wiped her nose on her sleeve, staring at him like he'd materialized from her thoughts. "You're the biker man," she whispered, voice small but steady, as if naming him made the fear recede. "You always wave back." Drift nodded, glancing around the empty road. No bus in sight, no cars stirring the dust. The backpack at her feet looked stuffed to bursting, clothes peeking from the zipper, a stuffed bear's ear poking out. "Where's your ride? And why the waterworks?" Clara hugged her knees tighter, the bench creaking under her shift. "Mama had to go early, double shift at the clinic. She said the bus comes at 6, but—" Her voice trailed, eyes darting to the horizon where the sun bled orange across the flats. "It didn't, and I waited like always. But those cars, they were there again last night. Black ones, no lights, watching our house. Mama says not to tell, but I'm scared." Drift's jaw tightened, a familiar chill settling in his bones. Unmarked cars, watchers in the shadows. He'd seen it before. In the underbelly of towns like this, corruption festering like rust on a forgotten frame. Dust Haven wasn't big, but it had its secrets. The roadside clinic where Clara's mom, Lena Bennett, pulled night shifts as a nurse, patching up drifters and locals alike. Whispers in the garage spoke of records gone missing, patients pressured to sign away rights to some shadowy outfit sniffing around medical files. Land deals maybe, or worse, exposing what shouldn't be touched. He'd ignored it all until now. Until this girl, with her innocent waves, pulled at a thread he'd buried deep. 20 years ago, in a rain-soaked hospital room, his sister Ellie had pressed a locket into his palm as she faded. "Promise me, Drift," she'd gasped, her hand frail against his calluses. "Never look away from a kid in trouble. They don't get second chances like we did." Ellie had been taken too young, lost to a system that chewed up the vulnerable and spat out husks. Drift had joined the Iron Promise after that, a brotherhood of riders bound by oaths older than blood, sworn to protect the unprotected. But life had worn him down. The rides grew solitary, the promises distant echoes. Not anymore. Drift unclasped the chain from around his neck, the locket small and worn, engraved with the emblem, a shield crossed by a road, thorns framing a single word: promise. Inside, a tiny photo of Ellie, smiling fierce. He held it out to Clara, the metal warm from his skin. "This is for you. It means something real. Help always finds those who need it. You wear it and you remember you're not alone." Clara's fingers trembled as she took it, the chain pooling in her palm like liquid silver. She slipped it over her head, tucking it under her collar, eyes shining with a mix of awe and relief. "Like a magic thing? For protection?" "Like a promise," Drift replied, standing as the distant rumble of the bus finally crested the hill. "One that sticks, no matter what. Tell your mama to watch her back, and if those cars come around again, you find me. I'll be riding this way." The bus hissed to a stop, doors folding open with a pneumatic sigh. Clara grabbed her backpack, heavier now with hope, and paused at the steps. "Thank you, biker man. I'll wave tomorrow, promise." Drift watched her board, the doors closing like a chapter's end. As the bus pulled away, kicking up dust that danced in the sunlight, he remounted his Harley, the engine roaring to life. But the road felt different now, a line drawn in the sand, pulling him back toward the shadows he'd evaded. Those watchers weren't random. They reeked of the same rot that had claimed Ellie. And if they thought a lone rider and a little girl's wave meant nothing, they'd learn soon enough. The Iron Promise didn't break for anyone. Back in Dusthaven, as Drift pulled into the garage, the first texts buzzed on his phone from old crewmates. Rook, the grizzled vet with a limp from Nam. Jax, the mechanic who could rebuild anything but trust. Word of trouble at the clinic had trickled in weeks ago, but Drift had tuned it out. Now, with Clara's face etched in his mind, he typed back, "Rally up. Got a promise to keep." The desert wind howled outside, carrying the scent of impending storm. Miles Nolan wasn't just drifting anymore. The wave had stopped him. And what came next would shake the dust from more than one forgotten oath. The garage in Dusthaven hummed, with the low growl of air compressors and the metallic tang of oil-soaked rags. Sunlight slanted through the open bays like searchlights, catching the gleam of tools scattered across workbenches scarred by years of hard use. Drift leaned against his Harley, wiping grease from his hands on a faded bandana, the phone still warm in his pocket from the messages he'd fired off. Rook and Jax were en route. Rook from his cabin up in the scrub hills, Jax from the parts run in the next town over. The Iron Promise wasn't a club that answered every call. It was a vow etched in chrome and scars, activated only when the old oaths demanded it. Today they did. Drift's mind replayed the morning, Clara's small hand closing around the locket, the bus doors sealing her away like a fragile secret. He'd ridden these roads to forget, not to remember, but the girl's fear had cracked open the vault he'd welded shut. Ellie's voice echoed in his head, faint as a whisper over engine roar. "Keep the promise, brother, for the ones who can't." He'd failed her once, letting the system bury her story under red tape and indifferent eyes. Not this time, not with a child waving from the edge of nowhere. The rumble of approaching bikes pulled him from the haze. 2 Harleys pulled in, dust clouds swirling in their wake like ghosts stirred to life. Rook killed his engine first, swinging a leg over with the deliberate care of a man whose knee had betrayed him in a war long past. At 62, he was all salt and pepper beard and eyes that had seen too much, his vest bearing the same thorn-framed skull as Drift's. Jax followed, Younger at 38, his frame wiry from endless wrenching, a tattoo of a coiled serpent peeking from his sleeve, a reminder of temptations he'd outrun. Drift. Rook grunted, clasping his forearm in a grip like iron. Heard you barking about trouble. Clinic again? Thought you said that mess wasn't ours. Jax nodded, tossing a rag over his shoulder as he eyed Drift's bike. Yeah, man. Last I checked, you were playing lone wolf. What's got you calling the pack? Drift led them inside, away from prying ears, the garage's shadows swallowing their words. He poured coffee from a dented pot, the steam rising bitter and black, mirroring the storm brewing in his chest. Wasn't planning to. But this morning, kid at the bus stop. Clara Bennett, Lena's girl. She's been waving at me every dawn like clockwork. Today she didn't, found her huddled there, scared out of her skin, backpack packed like she's running. Says black car's been circling their place, unmarked, no plates, watching. Rook's brow furrowed, sipping his coffee slow. Lena Bennett, the nurse at that roadside joint? Yeah, heard whispers. Folks saying the clinic's files are getting poked at. Some suit from the city pushing for consolidation, code for swallowing up records, maybe burying ones that don't fit the narrative. Land grabs tied to it, or worse, patients vanishing into paperwork. Jax leaned on a toolbox, arms crossed. I fixed up a rig for one of those watchers last week. Slick type, wouldn't say boo. But his buddy muttered about sensitive data and how the clinic's in the way. If it's corruption, it's got teeth. Town halls involved. Sheriff's office turning blind eyes for kickbacks. Drift felt the weight settle heavier, like sand in his boots after a long ride. The iron promise had roots in places like this, veterans and outcasts who'd sworn to shield the overlooked from the grind of indifferent power. Ellie had been one of them. A nurse herself, until the hospital where she worked got bought out, her warnings about falsified records dismissed as paranoia. She'd fought, exposed a thread of it, and paid with her life in an accident that reeked of cover-up. Drift had scattered after that, riding solo to numb the guilt. But Clara's wave. It was Ellie's hand, reaching through time, pulling him back. We ride to Lena's after shift, Drift said, voice steady as revving steel. Check the lay. If those cars show, we make sure she knows she's got backup. No guns, no noise, just presence. The promise means standing firm, letting the truth do the hitting. Rook chuckled low, a rumble like distant thunder. Presence, that's your way, all right. Silent as the dawn, but unbreakable. Remember that convoy in 09? We just rolled up and the snake slithered away without a shot. Loyalty like that, it's the real weapon. They spent the afternoon prepping, checking chains, airing tires, the ritual binding them tighter than blood. As the sun dipped low, painting the desert in fiery strokes, they mounted up. The trio thundered out of Dust Haven, engines harmonizing in a symphony of resolve, the wind carrying the scent of creosote and freedom. Route 19 stretched ahead, the same road that had borne witness to Clara's waves, now leading them toward the heart of the shadow. Lena's place was a modest trailer on the outskirts, flanked by Joshua trees clawing at the sky. Porch light flickered on as they pulled up, gravel crunching under tires. Lena stepped out, wiping hands on an apron, her face lined with exhaustion from the clinic's grind. Mid-30s, with Clara's eyes and a strength that spoke of battles unseen. She froze at the sight of the bikes. Mr. Nolan? Drift? What's this? He dismounted, helmet under arm, the others hanging back like sentinels. Heard about the Watchers. Clara mentioned them this morning, gave her something to hold on to, a locket. Means you're not facing it alone. Lena's eyes softened, then hardened with wariness. She glanced over her shoulder as if expecting shadows to stir. Those cars. They've been coming closer. Clinic's under pressure. Boss says, hand over patient files or lose the funding. But some of those records, they tell stories that could topple folks in high places. Falsified treatments, covered up exposures from that old mill site. I can't let it go quiet. A low hum cut the air then, headlights piercing the twilight. Two black sedans easing down the road, slowing as they passed. No lights, just the predatory glide. Rook shifted subtly, Jax's hand resting on his handlebars. The cars lingered a beat too long, engines purring like threats unspoken, before accelerating away into the dusk. Lena exhaled, shoulders sagging. See, they're testing. But with you here, maybe it's a sign. Drift nodded, the emblem on his vest catching the fading light. It's more than a sign, it's a line. Cross it and the promise rolls in full. We've got your back, Lena, for Clara, for the truth. As night cloaked the desert, the riders lingered a while, sharing coffee on the porch, stories weaving bonds stronger than fear. But Drift knew this was just the spark. The watchers wouldn't fade easy. Tomorrow, the crew would grow, oaths pulling more souls into the fray. The quiet wave had ignited something unbreakable, a redemption ride that would carve justice from the dust. And now, I invite you to leave in the comments where you're watching from and the exact hour you heard this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel and at what moments they reach you. The moon hung low over the trailer park, a silver coin etched against the star-pricked sky, casting long shadows that danced like uneasy spectres across the gravel. Drift sat on the porch steps, the wooden slats creaking under his weight, a chipped mug of coffee cooling in his calloused hands. The bitter steam mingled with the earthy scent of night-blooming sage. While Rook and Jax flanked Lena inside, their voices a low murmur through the screen door, sharing fragments of lives pieced together from road-worn tales. Clara had peeked out earlier, Locket glinting at her throat, before Lena tucked her into bed with a story of knights on iron steeds. Now, the quiet pressed in, broken only by the distant coyote howl and the faint tick of cooling engines. Drift's gaze fixed on the road where the sedans had vanished, their taillights swallowed by the dark like retreating predators. He'd felt their eyes, cold and calculating, sizing up the bikes as if weighing the cost of intrusion. Lena's words lingered, falsified treatments, buried exposures from the old mill, a toxic relic on the town's edge, where decades ago workers had breathed in poisons that twisted lives into quiet tragedies. The clinic held the proof in faded charts and desperate confessions, records that could unravel the web of developers and officials who'd turned a blind eye for profit. It mirrored Ellie's fight too closely, the hospital buyout, the silenced warnings, the accident that left Drift with nothing but a locket and a vow etched in regret. Footsteps crunched behind him, and Lena emerged, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders against the chill. She settled beside him, her presence steady like the anchor of a ship in storm-tossed waters. "You didn't have to come," she said softly, eyes tracing the horizon, "but I'm glad you did. Clara's been asking about you since the wave started, said the biker man must be a guardian from her books." Drift managed a half-smile, the lines around his eyes deepening. "Guardians don't always look the part, but promises, they don't fade." He paused, the words heavy as he pulled the chain's memory from his neck. "Lost my sister to something like this. She was a nurse, saw the rot firsthand, fought it and it took her. I rode away after, thinking distance would heal it, but seeing Clara there alone, it pulled me back. The iron promise, we're not heroes in capes, just men who keep oaths when the world's forgotten how." Lena nodded, her hand brushing the locket's outline under her own collar, a twin to Clara's, pressed into her palm earlier that evening. Oaths, that's more than most give these days. The clinic's boss, Harlan, he's folding under pressure, says it's progress, merging with a big city chain that promises funding. But I know better. Those files aren't just paper, they're lives. Folks like old Mr. Reyes, lungs scarred from the mill, denied care because it might spotlight the cover-up. If they get buried, the truth goes with them. The conversation wove on, threads of trust binding them as the night deepened. Rook joined them eventually, his limp softened by the porch's dim glow, recounting a ride from years back when the crew had shadowed a convoy of exploited workers across state lines. No fists thrown, just the thunder of engines drawing eyes and forcing questions. Jax lingered inside, sketching a rough map of the mill site on a napkin, his mechanic's mind mapping access points and blind spots. By midnight, plans solidified. Tomorrow, they'd scout the clinic at shift change, eyes on the watchers without tipping scales. Presence first, always. The Iron Promise's creed, a shield forged in restraint. Dawn broke with a vengeance, the sun clawing over the ridges in a blaze of copper and crimson, turning the desert into a furnace. Drift led the ride back to Dusthaven, the trio's Harleys cutting through the morning mist like blades through silk. The air hummed with purpose, engines pulsing in sync, the vibration traveling up Drift's arms like a second heartbeat. Route 19 unfurled before them, the bus stop a fleeting landmark where Clara's wave had begun it all, now empty, but alive in his rear view. Word had spread through the night. Texts buzzed like fireflies as more crew answered the call. By the time they hit the garage, 4 more bikes idled outside. Silas, a former firefighter with burns mapping his neck like abstract art. Mara, the only woman in the fold, a veteran mechanic whose steady hands hid a sniper's precision from desert wars. Tate and Lee, brothers in arms from Drift's early rides, their vests faded, but oaths sharp. 8 strong now, a convoy born from whispers, gathering not for glory, but for the quiet weight of loyalty. "Briefing," Drift said, voice cutting through the clamor as they clustered in the bay. Tools lay still. The garage a war room of grease and resolve. He sketched the situation on a whiteboard, Lena's trailer, the clinic's squat building off Main, the mill's rusted skeleton looming peripheral. Watchers escalating. Clinic's the key. Records there could blow the lid on the mill poisonings. Corruption runs deep. Town officials, maybe state suits. We don't charge in. We watch, we witness, we stand. If they push Lena or Clara, that's when the full promise rolls. Silas nodded, his voice gravel from smoke-scarred lungs. Seen it in blazes. Fire starts small, but ignore the spark, and it consumes all. We're the line that holds. Mara leaned forward, eyes keen. I'll take point on the clinic run, discreet like scouting dunes. If those cars circle, we log plates, faces, truth's our ammo. The group dispersed with nods and clasps, bikes roaring to life in staggered waves to avoid drawing heat. Drift hung back, mounting up last, the Locket's absence at his throat a hollow reminder. As he throttled onto the road, the wind whipped his face, carrying the sharp bite of juniper and the promise of confrontation. The clinic came into view mid-morning, a low-slung structure of peeling stucco, flanked by a parking lot dotted with staff vehicles and the ominous gleam of 2 black sedans. They parked across the street, engines off, blending into the heat haze like mirages. Lena emerged from her shift, backpack slung over one shoulder, scanning the lot with practiced caution. Drift watched from the shadows of a mesquite tree, heart steady but alert. She spotted them, a flicker of relief crossing her features, and crossed over. "They're inside," she murmured, sliding onto a bench nearby. Harlan's meeting with them now. Suits, clipboards, the works. Pressing for access codes. I stalled, said files are locked till audit. But Clara, school's out early today. I need to get her. Drift's grip tightened on his handlebars. We'll escort, full convoy if needed. As if summoned, the sedans pulled out, tires crunching slow, windows tinted to voids. One paused, engine idling as if daring the bikes to move. Rook revved subtly, a low warning growl that echoed across the asphalt. The car hesitated, then peeled away, dust billowing in its wake like a challenge flung. Lena exhaled, climbing into her beat-up sedan with a nod of thanks. The crew fell in behind as she drove toward the school, a rolling shield of chrome and conviction. But Drift sensed the shift, the air thickening with unspoken threats, the corruption coiling tighter. At the school pickup, Clara bounded out, Locket swinging, her wave brighter than the sun. She climbed in with her mother, safe for now, but the road ahead twisted darker. Back at the garage that afternoon, reports filtered in. Mara's scout confirmed shadows at the mill, guards patrolling fences that hid contaminated soil. Tate overheard talk in the diner, sheriff's deputy pocketing envelopes, turning blind to the pressure. The crew gathered again, faces set like stone in the fading light, the scent of cooling metal heavy in the air. "We're in it now," Drift said, meeting their eyes. "For the girl, for Lena, for every promise the system's broken. Redemption isn't loud. It's this, standing when others fold." Nods rippled through, bonds sealing like welds under flame. Night fell, the desert whispering secrets, but the iron promise burned steady, a beacon against the encroaching dark, pulling drift from drift toward destiny. The Watchers would return, but so would they, oaths unbroken, ready to carve light from shadow. The stars wheeled overhead like distant witnesses, indifferent to the flicker of lantern light spilling from the garage windows onto the cooling gravel. Drift paced the oil-stained concrete, the echo of his boots a metronome against the hush that had settled after the briefing. The crew had scattered to their posts, Mara and Silas heading out to circle the mill under cover of night, Tate and Lee watching the sheriff's station from the diner's shadows, but the air thrummed with the residue of their resolve, thick as the scent of gunmetal and midnight dew. Drift's fingers traced the empty space at his throat where the locket once hung, a phantom weight reminding him of the oaths now shared, multiplied across vests and hearts. Sleep evaded him that night, the trailer's confines too close after Lena's call an hour past midnight. "They're here," she'd whispered over the line. Voice edged with steel but laced with fear. At the house, 2 cars, lights off, Clara's awake, clutching that locket like it's her shield. Drift had been en route before the call ended, his Harley slicing through the black like a blade, wind howling secrets from the scrub. Rook and Jax met him halfway, their bikes materializing from side roads, a silent phalanx forming without a word. They arrived to find the sedans idling at the trailer's edge, engines a low menace, headlights dipped to ghosts. Lena stood on the porch, arms crossed, her silhouette framed by the door's glow, Clara peeking from behind her legs. The lead car's door cracked open, a figure emerging, tall, suited, face half-shadowed by a fedora pulled low. He stepped forward, clipboard in hand, the crunch of his shoes deliberate against the gravel. "Miss Bennett," the man said, voice smooth as oiled leather, carrying just enough authority to chill the air. "We need to talk. Clinic business. Those files, hand them over, and this ends quiet." Lena didn't flinch, though her knuckles whitened on the railing. "It's after hours, Mr. Hale, and you know the rules. No access without a warrant. Take your shadows and go." Hale's lips curled, a predator's smile in the dim. He glanced at the bikes pulling up, engines cutting to a predatory silence, Drift dismounting with measured calm, Rook and Jax flanking like weathered oaks. "Company? Thought you were alone in this, Lena. These riders. They won't change the math. The board's decided. The clinic folds into the network by week's end. Records transfer or funding dries up. Simple." Drift stepped into the lantern's pool, his shadow stretching long across the yard, the iron promise patch catching the light like a warning flare. "Math's one thing, promises are another. You want her files? Earn them proper. No creeping in the dark." Hale's eyes narrowed, flicking over Drift's frame. The tattoos, the steady gaze honed by roads that forgave no weakness. "Biker vigilantes? Charming. This is official. Town ordinance. Backed by the sheriff. Step aside, or you'll find your garage audited next." The words hung, a gauntlet thrown, But Drift felt the crew's presence like an unseen chain, linking them to the oaths that bound tighter than law. Ellie's face flashed in his mind, her final plea a spark against the corruption's chill. He'd ridden from her loss, but here, with Clara's wide eyes fixed on him from the doorway, retreat wasn't an option. Official don't mean right. We've seen your kind before, burying truths for coin. The mill's poison. Those charts tell what you won't. Walk away, Hale. The promise sees all. Attention coiled. The air electric with unspoken edges, the sedan's engines revving softly as if urging retreat. Hale hesitated, clipboard tapping his thigh, then backed toward his car, the facade cracking just enough to reveal the rot beneath. This isn't over. The sheriff will hear of interference. He slid in, the doors slamming like judgments deferred, tires spinning dust as they fled into the night, taillights winking out like snuffed threats. Lena sagged against the doorframe, pulling Clara close, the girl's small hand clutching the Locket's chain. They came bold this time. Harlan called earlier, says the pressure's from above, state level now. If I don't sign off tomorrow, they threaten custody reviews. Clara's school records tied to the clinic somehow. Leverage. Drift nodded. The crew gathering loose around the porch, a circle of quiet strength. Rook lit a cigarette, the flame briefly illuminating his scarred knuckles. Leverage is their game, but we've played it. Back in 12, we shadowed a foster run. Kids shuffled like cargo, just rolled alongside. No words. System blinked first. Jax crouched to Clara's level, offering a gentle smile that softened his wiry edges. That locket? It's got stories in it, ones that stick. The girl nodded, her fear easing into wonder, the emblem a talisman against the encroaching storm. As the adrenaline ebbed, Drift felt the pull of deeper waters, the sheriff's involvement twisting the knot tighter. A man he'd nodded to in passing at the diner, now revealed as thread in the web. Corruption wasn't faceless here. It wore badges. Shook hands at town meetings. The iron promise demanded more than presence now, witnesses perhaps, or a stand that forced light into the cracks. Dawn crept in reluctant, the sky bruising purple over the ridges, as the crew dispersed with plans etched in hushed tones, Mara to tail Hale's plates, Silas to the courthouse for public filings on the mill. Drift lingered with Lena, sharing coffee in the trailer's cramped kitchen, the steam curling like unspoken confessions. Ellie, my sister, she faced this, warned of falsified reports, got shut down. I won't let it repeat. We'll document everything, build a wall of truth they can't breach. Lena met his eyes, the weight of alliance settling like shared armor. For Clara, for all of us carrying scars we didn't ask for. By mid-morning, the garage buzzed anew, reports filtering in like rain on parched earth. Mara radioed from a payphone. Hale's car traced to a shell company, links to the developers eyeing the mill site for reclamation. A clean slate over buried sins. Silas uncovered whispers of payoffs, envelopes sliding under office doors. The crew swelled to 12 by noon, more riders answering the digital call. Veterans from dusty chapters, a nurse who'd walked Lena's path, their engines a growing chorus against the institutional grind. Drift stood at the bay door, watching the horizon where Route 19 shimmered in the heat. Clara's bus stop, a distant speck. The wave that started it all had rippled into a tide, pulling secrets to the surface, testing loyalties forged in fire. But as the sun climbed, a new shadow loomed, a call from the sheriff's office summoning Lena for questioning. The line was blurring, conscience clashing with corrupted authority, and Drift knew the ride ahead would demand more than steel. It would carve redemption from the heart of the fray. The desert wind picked up, carrying the faint echo of engines rallying. A promise unbroken, hurtling toward the moral storm's eye. If this story's stirring something deep in you, hit that like button below. It helps spread these tales of quiet courage far and wide. The sheriff's office squatted on the edge of Dusthaven like a weathered sentinel, its adobe walls bleached pale by relentless sun, the American flag snapping taut against a wind that carried the faint, acrid tang of distant wildfires. Dust devils swirled in the parking lot, kicking up grit that stung like accusations as Lena's sedan pulled in, flanked by a loose formation of Harleys that rumbled low and purposeful. Drift rode point, his bike's engine a steady growl underscoring the tension, the vibration humming through his gloves like a warning pulse. Behind him, Rook and Jax held the rear, with Mara and Silas peeling off earlier to circle the block, eyes on any unmarked shadows that might tail. Lena gripped the wheel, her knuckles pale against the cracked vinyl. Clara tucked safe at the trailer with Tate and Lee, standing watch like silent guardians. Questioning, she'd scoffed over coffee that morning, the steam curling between them like fragile barriers. More like an ambush. Harlan's already caved, signed the transfer papers last night, but I held out on the sensitive files. Now this. Drift had nodded, the empty chain at his neck a reminder of stakes higher than paper. The iron promise wasn't about storming doors. It was about holding ground, letting integrity erode the facade of power until it crumbled under its own weight. They dismounted as one, boots thudding on sun-baked earth, the crew forming a loose arc behind Lena as she pushed through the heavy glass doors. The lobby smelled of stale coffee and polished wood, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead like trapped insects. A deputy at the desk glanced up, his badge glinting dully, eyes widening at the influx of leather and resolve. Ms. Bennett, Sheriff Klein's waiting, alone. Drift stepped forward, his shadow falling long across the counter, voice even as desert stone. She's not alone. We're witnesses. Anything said here, it's heard. The deputy hesitated, phone half lifted, but a door creaked open down the hall and Sheriff Klein emerged, mid-50s, paunch straining his uniform, face creased with the weariness of compromises long made. He eyed the group, lips thinning, but waved Lena through with a curt nod. Fine, but keep it civil. This town's got rules. The interrogation room was a stark box, scuffed table, 2 chairs, a one-way mirror reflecting their approach like a judgmental eye. Lena sat straight-backed, hands folded, while Drift and Rook took the corners, Jax lingering by the door. Klein entered last, clipboard in hand, settling opposite with a sigh that carried the weight of reluctant authority. The air conditioner hummed faintly, a counterpoint to the thickening silence. Ms. Bennett, Klein began, tapping a pen against the table, the rhythm sharp as ticking doubt. You've been uncooperative, clinics merging, standard procedure, but holding back files, that's obstruction. We got reports of interference last night. Those riders outside your place, friends of yours? Lena met his gaze, steady as the horizon. Interference? From men who showed up when your deputies wouldn't answer my calls about prowlers. As for the files, they're protected. Patient privacy, Sheriff, or did that get lost in the merger talks? Klein leaned back, chair creaking, his eyes flicking to Drift, the biker who nodded to him at fuel stops, now a fixture in the room's tension. This ain't personal, Lena. Pressure from county. Developers want that mill site cleared. New homes, jobs, old records, they complicate things. Buried history stays buried for a reason. Sign off and it ends. No more cars, no summons. For your girl's sake. The words landed like gravel under tires, and Drift felt the coil tighten in his chest. Clara's face flickered in his mind, her small hand waving from the bus stop, now a beacon pulling him through the ghosts of Ellie's fight. He'd buried his own regrets in miles of road, but here, in this fluorescent glare, they resurfaced, raw as fresh welds. Reason, Drift said, voice low, cutting the air. Like the reason workers coughed up their lungs from that mill's dust, or the reason nurses like Lena's boss fold while families pay the price. We've seen your buried history, Sheriff. It poisons more than soil. Klein's pen stilled, his face hardening. but a flicker of something, guilt perhaps, or the echo of his own oaths, crossed his features. "You don't know the half, Nolan. State suits breathing down my neck. One wrong move, and the whole department folds. I'm trying to keep peace here." "Peace built on silence ain't peace," Rook rumbled from the corner, his limp forgotten in the stand, eyes like weathered flint. "We rode for worse. Vets left to rot after wars we fought, systems that chew the vulnerable and call it progress. The promise. It's what you do when the badge don't shine right." The room hung heavy, the mirror's reflection multiplying their standoff into an army of shadows. Outside, engines revved subtly, Mara signaling from the lot, more crew arriving unannounced, their presence a growing thunder that seeped through the walls. Klein rubbed his temple, the clipboard sliding aside. "This escalates. It goes bad for everyone. Lena, think of Clara. School's fine now, but custody reviews. Leverage exists." Lena's breath caught, but she straightened, the Locket's outline pressing against her collar like an invisible shield. "Leverage on a child? That's your piece?" "No, I'll testify if I have to. Every chart, every confession. The truth outlasts your suits." A knock shattered the standoff. Deputy at the door, face ashen. "Sheriff." More bikes and calls coming in, folks asking questions about the mill, public records requests piling up. Klein stood abruptly, chair scraping like a retreat, his authority fraying at the edges. "This ain't done. Get your affairs in order." He stormed out, the door banging shut, leaving the echo of his footsteps fading down the hall. Lena exhaled, shoulders easing as Drift placed a steady hand on the table. "You held the line. That's the win." Outside, the parking lot had transformed. A dozen Harleys now idling in formation, vests emblazoned with thorns and shields, the crew's quiet vigil drawing stares from passers-by. Silas handed Lena a thermos of coffee, his burn-scarred neck catching the sun. "Heard the tail end through the vents. Solid stand. We've got eyes on the courthouse, filings to expose the payoffs." As they mounted up, the convoy forming a rolling escort back to the trailer, Drift throttled his engine, the roar a symphony of solidarity. The wind whipped dust into veils, carrying the sharp scent of creosote and resolve. But in the rear view, a black sedan lingered at the lot's edge, watching, its presence a promise of retaliation. The sheriff's bluff had cracked, but the web tightened. State involvement hinting at deeper rot, pulling the iron promise toward a reckoning that would test every scar and oath. Clara waited on the porch, her wave tentative but bright as they pulled in, the locket glinting like a star against her shirt. Drift dismounted, crouching to her level, the desert sun warming his back. "Told you. Help finds you." Her small nod sealed it, a thread in the tapestry of chosen family as the crew dispersed into watchful shifts. Night would fall soon, shadows lengthening, but the light of unbroken promises burned fiercer, carving paths through the corruption's veil. The ride wasn't over, it was accelerating toward justice's raw edge. The twilight bled across the desert like spilled ink, turning the Joshua trees into jagged silhouettes that clawed at the fading sky. Drift's Harley idled at the trailer's edge, the engine's low thrum a counterpoint to the evening's hush, carrying the faint, resinous bite of creosote on the breeze. Clara's wave lingered in his mind, small, fierce, a spark against the encroaching dusk, as the crew peeled away in staggered pairs, their taillights winking like fireflies into the scrub. Lena stood on the porch, arms wrapped around her daughter, the Locket's chain catching the last rays like a thread of silver defiance. "Go rest," Drift said, a voice gravel-soft over the cooling metal. "We've got the perimeter. No shadows touch this place tonight." She nodded, the weight of the day's standoff etching deeper lines around her eyes, but a quiet resolve steadied her stance. Inside, the trailer glowed warm, the scent of simmering beans and cornbread wafting out, a fragile normalcy amid the storm. Drift kicked his stand down, joining Rook on the overgrown lot across the road, where they settled into lawn chairs scavenged from the garage, the canvas creaking under their frames. Jax patrolled the flank, his flashlight beam slicing the dark in lazy arcs, while Mara radioed updates from her vantage near the mill road. Quiet so far, but Hale's plates looped back toward Town Hall. Something's brewing. The night deepened, stars pricking the velvet overhead like scattered oaths, the air cooling to a crisp edge that nipped at exposed skin. Drift's thoughts drifted to Ellie, her photo a ghost in the locket now shared. How she'd clutched his hand in that sterile room, whispering of promises that outlasted pain. He'd failed to shield her from the system's grind, the falsified reports that painted her warnings as delusions. But here, with Lena's charts as the new battleground, redemption rode shotgun, urging him forward. The sheriff's retreat had been a feint. Klein's eyes had held the flicker of a man cornered, not convinced. State suits meant deeper pockets, longer shadows, developers with ties to the mill's old sins, where contaminated earth promised profit if scrubbed from records. A low rumble shattered the quiet around midnight, not engines but tires on gravel, deliberate and slow. Drift tensed, hand instinctively dropping to his vest pocket, where a notebook waited. Witness, not warrior. Headlights pierced the dark, two sedans materializing like phantoms, pulling up short of the trailer with engines cutting to silence. Doors opened in unison, 4 figures emerging. Hale in the lead, flanked by 2 deputies in plain clothes and a woman in a crisp blazer, her briefcase a symbol of institutional armor. No badges flashed, but the authority hung heavy, the air thickening with the synthetic scent of cologne and tension. "Miss Bennett," Hale called, voice carrying clear across the yard, stepping into the porch light's pool. Lena appeared at the door, Clara's silhouette behind her, the girl's hand clutching her mother's skirt. "This is Ms. Harlan from Child Services. We need to speak, now, about custody arrangements." Drift rose fluidly, Rook at his side, their shadows merging into one elongated warning. Jax materialized from the scrub, flashlight off but presence solid. "Midnight house call? That's not procedure," Drift said, closing the distance without haste, boots silent on the dust. "Or did the sheriff forget his own rules?" Hale's gaze flicked to the riders, calculating, but the woman, Harlan, stepped forward, her heels sinking slightly into the soft earth. "This is procedure, Mr. Nolan. Reports of instability, unauthorized visitors, potential endangerment. Clara's welfare is paramount, a temporary placement until the clinic matter resolves." Lena's voice cut sharp from the porch, steady as rebar. "Endangerment? From men who answered when your office hung up. Those files you want, they protect kids like her from the mill's legacy your developers bury." Clara stays. End of discussion. The deputies shifted, hands hovering near belts, but Hale raised a palm, his smile thin as razor wire. "Leverage, Lena. Sign the transfer, or we file for removal. School records show absences, stress, they say. And these associates? Not family. Blood tests, background checks. It gets messy." Clara whimpered softly, the sound slicing Drift like shrapnel, her small face pale in the light. He crouched, meeting her eyes from afar, the locket a glint of promise. "Hey, kid, remember what it means. Help finds you. Always." She nodded, fingers twisting the chain, and in that moment, the crew's bond ignited. Rook's low growl, Jax's subtle step forward. The distant hum of approaching bikes, signaling Mara's relay, had summoned reinforcements. Harlan opened her briefcase, papers rustling like dry leaves in wind. "Sign here, Ms. Bennett. Voluntary compliance avoids court." But Lena shook her head, the door creaking as she barred it wider, a wall of maternal steel. "No. The truth comes out first. I've got copies, mill exposures, denied claims. Your merger buries lives, not saves them." Tension coiled tighter, the night air electric. the sedan's interiors glowing faintly from idling dashboards. Hale's facade cracked, a vein pulsing at his temple. "You force this and—" Engines thundered then, a convoy cresting the rise. 8 more Harleys, vests gleaming under moonlight, Silas at the fore with Tate and Lee, their formation a rolling testament to chosen kin. They didn't charge. They encircled, engines idling in harmonious growl, a presence that amplified the silence into thunder. No words, just the weight of oaths. Veterans who'd pulled brothers from fire, nurses who'd mended the broken, all converging on this dusty stand. Hale froze, the papers forgotten in his hand, as Harlan whispered urgently at his side. The deputies exchanged glances, unease rippling through their ranks. "This is interference," Hale spat, but his voice wavered, the bluster hollow against the crew's unyielding line. Drift stood, the group closing ranks without touch, a human shield forged in restraint. "Interference? We're witnesses. To every threat, every midnight raid. The iron promise sees the rot, mill poisons in the soil, payoffs in the ledgers. Push harder, and it all spills public. State suits can't bury what riders carry on the wind." The standoff stretched, seconds bleeding into eternity, the desert's chill seeping deeper. Clara's soft breathing from the porch anchored them, a reminder of stakes beyond power plays. Finally, Harlan snapped her case shut, the click echoing like a concession. "This isn't over. Review board meets tomorrow." They retreated to their cars, doors slamming with forced finality, tires spinning dust as they fled into the black, leaving only the acrid scent of burnout. Lena exhaled, pulling Clara close as the crew dismounted, clasping forearms in quiet victory. Rook lit a cigarette, the flame steady. They blinked, but dawn brings the real test. Courthouse suits the full machine. Drift nodded, eyes on the road where taillights faded. The wind whispering of battles yet to crest. Silas approached, handing over a folder from his saddlebag, duplicates of Lena's files smuggled from the clinic by an ally nurse. "We leak smart. Public eyes first, then the fall." As the group huddled under the stars, sharing water from canteens and fragments of resolve, Drift felt the shift, a tide turning, promises weaving into unbreakable chain. Ellie's ghost smiled in the shadows, her vow alive in the engine's echo. But Hale's parting glare promised retaliation, the corruption's fangs bared. Tomorrow the crew would ride to the review, a convoy of conscience against the storm's heart, where redemption demanded one final unyielding stand. The moon climbed higher, bathing the trailer in silver. As plans solidified in hushed tones, the scent of sage mingling with the promise of justice's dawn. The first blush of dawn streaked the sky over Dust Haven, like veins of fire through cooled ash, the desert awakening with a chorus of waking birds and the distant mournful wail of a freight train slicing the flats. Drift throttled his Harley steady, leading the convoy down Route 19. The engine's rumble blending with the wind's low moan, carrying the sharp mineral tang of dew-kissed earth. 12 bikes now stretched behind him in a disciplined line, Rook and Jax close, Mara and Silas weaving the flanks, the rest a tapestry of weathered vests and unyielding oaths. Lena rode shotgun in her sedan, Clara's small face pressed to the window, waving faintly at the mirrors as if etching her trust into the morning light. The locket at her throat caught the rising sun, a glint of silver promise against the blue of her dress. They'd risen before the light, the trailer's kitchen alive with the sizzle of eggs and the murmur of strategy. Folders of duplicated files passed hand to hand, each page a testament to the mill's hidden toll. Scarred lungs, denied claims, lives eroded by the very ground they'd toiled. Silas's courthouse digs had unearthed more, payoff ledgers disguised as consulting fees, signatures linking Hale's shell company to state developers hungry for the site's reclamation. No guns in the saddlebags, no shouts in the plan, just presence, amplified by the crew's growing network. Word had rippled through the night. Texts to old allies, calls to reporters who'd chased similar shadows, even a nod from the diner's grizzled patrons who'd lost kin to the mill's curse. The Iron Promise wasn't storming the gates. It was flooding them with light. The courthouse loomed at town's heart, a squat fortress of sandstone and pillars, its steps worn smooth by footsteps of compromise. Bikes pulled up in orderly ranks, engines cutting to a profound silence that echoed off the facade, drawing stares from early clerks and passers-by. Lena emerged from her car, folder clutched like a shield, her chin lifted in the resolve Drift had come to recognize as kin to Ellie's fire. Clara stayed behind with Tate and Lee at a nearby park, safe under watchful eyes. A wave from the trailer's porch, the last image burning in Drift's mind, a child's faith that demanded no less than victory. Inside, the review board chamber hummed with fluorescent sterility, rows of folding chairs half filled by suits and officials, the air thick with the musty scent of old paper and fresh coffee. Hale sat at the panel's edge, flanked by Harlan and Klein, their faces masks of practiced neutrality. A stenographer's keys clacked softly, capturing the proceedings like a reluctant confessor. Lena took the stand, voice clear as she laid out the files. Charts of poisoned workers, falsified denials, the merger's role in erasing evidence for profit. "This isn't progress," she said, eyes sweeping the room. "It's erasure. For my patients, for my daughter, truth can't be signed away." Murmurs rippled, but Hale leaned forward, his tone oily with rebuttal. "Speculation, Ms. Bennett. The merger streamlines care, funding for the vulnerable. These files are outdated, irrelevant to modern needs." Klein shifted uncomfortably, his badge a dull gleam under the lights, while Harlan scribbled notes. Her briefcase a barrier against the unfolding scrutiny. Drift and the crew filled the back rows, a wall of leather and silence, their presence a subtle pressure that thickened the air. No outbursts, just steady gazes, Rook's flint-hard stare, Mara's precise watch, Silas's scarred hands folded like folded flags. Outside, more riders idled in the lot, engines off but ready, while Silas's ally, a local journalist with a notepad and a nose for rot, slipped in late, recorder discreet in his pocket. The board chair, a silver-haired judge with eyes weary from years on the bench, called for public comment. That's when Drift rose, the room's hush deepening as boots echoed on the tile. "I'm Miles Nolan," he said, voice carrying the gravel of endless roads, stepping to the mic without flourish. "Rider with the Iron Promise. We don't chase headlines, we keep oaths. Saw this play out before, with my sister, a nurse buried by the same system. She exposed lies like these, paid with her life. Lena's fighting for the same, kids breathing dust their parents coughed up, families denied justice for coin. Those files, their voices, ignore them, and you're no better than the mill's shadows." Hale's jaw tightened, but the words landed stirring nods from the audience. Workers in faded caps, a widow clutching a handkerchief, faces etched with the mill's legacy. The journalist's pen flew, questions bubbling as more voices rose. A former patient detailing his denied treatment, a mechanic echoing Jax's whispers from the garage. The board chair called order, but the tide had turned, the room's energy shifting from rote procedure to reckoning. Klein cleared his throat, standing unbidden. "Sheriff's office. We've overlooked. My deputies, some took envelopes. Thought it kept the peace, but seeing this, He trailed, glancing at Drift, the flicker of conscience breaking through his facade. "I'll open an internal review. Full audit on the merger, the payoffs." Harlan gathered her papers, defeat in the rustle, while Hale's exit was a hurried retreat, his briefcase swinging like a pendulum of unraveling schemes. The chair adjourned with a gavel's crack, promising further hearings, but the fracture was set, the corruption's web pierced, light seeping through cracks too wide to seal. Outside, the sun climbed triumphant, bathing the steps in gold as the crew reunited with Lena. She clasped Drift's forearm, eyes shining with unshed tears. "You did it. The promises. They held." Drift shook his head, the wind tugging at his vest, carrying the faint, hopeful scent of blooming yucca. "We all did. For Clara, for Ellie, for the family we choose when blood falls short." Clara ran up then, backpack swinging, her wave full circle now, pulling them into a hug that bridged the miles of his solitary rides. The convoy mounted up, engines harmonizing in a roar of closure, thundering back toward Route 19 where it began. In the weeks that followed, the mill site sat idle, developers withdrawing under scrutiny's glare. The clinic's records preserved as a bulwark for lawsuits that promised real restitution. Klein resigned quietly, his office purging the rot, while Hale's company dissolved into investigations that echoed far beyond Dusthaven. Drift rode the dawn stretch again, but now with Clara's wave met by a stop, coffee shared on the bench, stories weaving bonds that mended old scars. The iron promise grew, oaths renewed in the desert's vast embrace, a legacy of quiet stands against the cynical tide. Redemption wasn't a blaze, it was the steady burn of loyalty, carving justice from dust and dawn. And in that light, Drift found his anchor, not in motion, but in the promises that finally, truly came home. Thank you for riding this journey with us to the end. These stories of honor and heart are brighter when shared. If they've touched you, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. We'll keep the confessions rolling, one promise at a time.